Hey there, and welcome to Real Estate Unpacked. So here's a question. When someone asks you what's happening in the real estate market right now, do you have an answer? Like a real one? Not the vague, it's a great time to buy, or inventory is tight stuff. I mean the kind of answer that makes people lean in and go, wait, how do you know all this? That's what this podcast is about. Every week, we are going to unpack what's actually moving the real estate market, the trends, the data, the economic shifts that matter. It's the stuff worth knowing, because here's the reality. Staying on top of the market shouldn't require a second full-time job, but your clients expect you to know what's going on. Whether you're a real estate agent who wants to be the go-to advisor in your market, or you're just trying to figure out if now's the time to make a move, this show is your weekly briefing on what matters right now in real estate and why. No economics degree needed to make sense of what's going on. Just straight talk about the market so you can be the smart one in the room when anyone asks the question. So let's unpack it. Let's start with the fact that the S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller U.S. National Home Price Index and the Federal Housing Finance Agency both released their price indices last week, and they basically said the same thing. Home prices are still going up, but barely, like the slowest barely we have seen in a decade. So the numbers. Well, the Federal Housing Finance Agency, and we're just going to call them FHFA for short, well, they showed prices flat month over month at 0.0% and up just 1.7% year over year. Case-Shiller's 20-city index, well, it's up 1.4% annually. Both are showing the weakest gains since 2012. And what does this actually mean? Well, remember when home prices were climbing 10 to 20% a year during the pandemic? Yeah, well, we all know those days are over. But here's the thing. Prices are still rising, just really slowly. So slowly that they're not keeping up with inflation anymore. Now, for you realtors, this is your market normalization talking point. So it's where we say it's not a crash, it's not a correction, just the market returning to something that looks like normal. Now, the National Association of Realtors pending home sales report came out last week, and it's a bit of a lagging indicator since it reports on the previous month, which was October for the November report. But this report tells us that the Midwest, well, it's having a moment. The headline, pending sales ticked up 1.9% in October from September, but they're still down 0.4% from last October. And the regional breakdown shows us that the Midwest absolutely crushed it with a 5.3% month over month jump. The South posted modest gains, and the West, well, it is down 7% year over year. Ouch. Now, Lawrence Yun, the economist for NAR, said the Midwest shined above other regions due to better affordability, while contract signings retreated in the more expensive West region. And what this actually means is people are buying where they can afford to buy. Shocking, right? The Midwest has lower prices, so buyers are actually pulling the trigger. Meanwhile, expensive markets are seeing buyers retreat because, well, math. And for you realtors, if you're in the Midwest or South, lean into your affordability advantage. If you're in the West, prepare for longer negotiations for buyers with cold feet. NAR notes that only 17% of agents expect more buyer traffic in the next 3 months, and that's down from 20% in September, so don't expect a stampede. Redfin released a delistings report, and this is a juicy one. Nearly 85,000 sellers pulled their homes off the market in September, and that is up 28% from last year, and it is the highest level we've seen in 8 years. So why are sellers rage quitting? Well, 70% of listings were what they call stale or on the market for 60 plus days without going under contract. The typical delisted home sat for 100 days before the seller gave up. About 15% of delistings were homes at risk of selling at a loss. There are 500,000 more sellers than buyers right now. The plot twist? This is actually propping up home prices. When sellers refuse to drop their price and instead pull the listing, it reduces the actual supply available to buyers. Classic standoff. Now, who's delisting? Well, almost half, or 47%, are people who bought within the last 5 years, especially pandemic buyers who still remember sky-high prices and are not ready to accept today's reality. And the regional winners and losers? Well, delistings jumped 74.5% in Virginia Beach, 53.9% in DC, and 53.3% in San Jose. Florida markets dominate the stale listing rankings. Miami and Fort Lauderdale are both at 84.6%. Now, for realtors, price it right the first time or prepare for a long sit. Sellers who bought in 2020 to 2023 need reality checks about current market conditions. 1 in 5 delisted homes gets relisted, often at lower prices. So watch for those, quote, new listings that look vaguely familiar. Use this data to set expectations. Look, 7 in 10 homes are sitting for 60 plus days. Let's not be one of them. That's the line to take to your sellers. Now, I don't know if you saw this, but it came up at a Thanksgiving conversation with my family this last week, and it is an article from Newsweek that was just published. And if you stop at the headline, they claim that a price correction worse than 2008 is coming to the US housing market. Now, this is the fear-mongering article you need to debunk. Here's the claim. Housing analyst Melody Wright predicts home prices will drop 50% in 2026, worse than 2008, as prices, quote, correct to match median household income, which is about $84,000. Her reasoning? Investors are going to mass exit the market, government will have to become the buyer of last resort, abandoned investor properties will create chaos, and the tariff terror is spooking buyers. But here's the current reality check. The national median price is up 1.2% year over year, and price growth has decelerated, but certainly not crashed. I urge you to go back to the 2 indices I reported on at the beginning of the show to show that we have growth. It's just slow, and yeah, the speed has slowed down. So for realtors, here is your article debunking toolkit. Number 1, lending standards are completely different than 2008. No subprime loans, no ninja loans. Those were those no income, no job, no asset loans. Borrowers are now qualified. Number 2, homeowner equity is massive. Years of appreciation mean most homeowners aren't underwater. Number 3, inventory is still low. 4.4 months of supply versus about 11 months from 2008. Now, this is regional, not national. Some markets, some submarkets in Florida and Texas are correcting from pandemic overheating, but the Northeast and Midwest, well, those are still appreciating well. And Melody Wright is one analyst. Most economists predict modest continued growth or slight declines, not 50% crashes. So here's your client conversation. You can tell them, you may have seen the headlines predicting a 50% crash. Here's what's actually happening, and then walk through the data points above. As far as interest rates go, they're still pretty boring. They've remained flat and are hovering around 6.2 to 6.3%. And even though the Fed has cut rates, and there is a majority agreement that they'll do that again at the next Fed meeting on December 10th, we're not seeing that move the needle much for mortgage rates. It may be time to get used to these current rates as the new normal. And some good news from last week are that mortgage applications did jump up. Purchase applications are up 20% compared to this time last year. And government-backed loans like FHA and VA loans are having their strongest week since 2023. So buyers out there, they're getting pre-approved. They're figuring out what they can afford. That's progress. It really is. It means people have moved from thinking about buying to I'm actually filling out paperwork. It's a real step in the right direction. But here's the thing. Knowing what you can buy and actually buying are two very different things. Think of it like this. Getting pre-approved is like getting your driver's license. Congrats, you are legally allowed to drive. But that doesn't mean you've picked out a car yet, negotiated the price, signed the paperwork, or even driven it home. You've just proven you're qualified to get behind the wheel. And right now, that's where a lot of buyers are stuck. They've got the pre-approval letter in hand, they know their budget, they're scrolling through listings, but they are not closing the loop. They're not pulling the trigger. Now, here's my read on what is actually happening. I think buyers are being stymied by something called the paradox of choice. And once you understand what it is, you'll see it everywhere, not just in real estate, but in your entire life. The paradox of choice is this idea that having more options doesn't actually make us better decision makers. In fact, it does the opposite. The more choices we have, the harder it becomes to choose anything at all. We freeze, we second guess, we keep looking, thinking, well, maybe there's something better out there if I just look at one more listing. And I think that is exactly what's happening with these buyers who are getting pre-approved, but not buying. They know what they can afford. They know the market. But instead of making them more confident, All that information and all these options, all these listings available, well, they're making buyers less able to commit. So let me explain how this actually works. It starts with something that on the surface we all pretty much love, and that is the idea of having choices. But there has been some research around the idea of choices, and the research shows that choices, too many of them, can actually sometimes tie our brain in knots. It's called the paradox of choice. So imagine you are standing in front of a table with 24 flavors of jam. It's a beautiful rainbow of possibilities. But guess what? That jam packed table is actually making it harder for you to pick one. And this was an actual, real study that was done. Psychologists Sheena Iyengar and Mark Lepper tested this in 2000. One day, shoppers got 24 jams to try. Another day, just 6. What they found was that when people were given more options, they did have more people come to the table, but fewer actually bought the jam. However, when there were just 6 options on the table to sample, people bought the jams at a much higher rate. More choices attracted more attention, but resulted in fewer decisions. Now enter Barry Schwartz, who literally wrote the book on this titled The Paradox of Choice: Why More is Less. Schwartz explains that when we're faced with tons of options, our brains go into maximizing mode. We're not just trying to choose a good option, we're trying to choose the perfect one. That leads to stress, second guessing, and what he calls buyer's remorse. Even after choosing, we imagine the options we didn't pick and wonder if we made the wrong call. And it's not just jam. The same thing happens with insurance, phone plans, job offers, you name it. I mean, Costco knows this and limits your choices because they know the more options you have, the harder it becomes to make a decision and the less satisfied you often are with the choice that you make. Now, we all totally understand buying a home is likely the biggest decision and, yes, the biggest investment a buyer will ever make. So their instinct is to think that they need to see everything out there, and it does make sense. But here's where Schwartz's advice in his book becomes incredibly helpful. He suggests shifting from being a maximizer to what he calls a satisficer. Now, say that 5 times fast. A maximizer wants to see every possible listing. A satisficer sets clear criteria, your must haves and nice to haves, and chooses from the homes that truly meet your life, your needs, and your budget. This isn't lowering your standards, it's lowering the pressure. When you set your must haves ahead of time, you're essentially creating a map. Instead of wandering into every home in the market and trying to bend your needs to fit the house, you are evaluating homes based on your values, not the other way around. So, your job, fellow realtor, is to help guide your buyer from the start, to coach them on their true needs, and set a plan from the start that these are the homes that you're going to look at, not everything that might possibly have the tiniest chance of working out. No, just the ones that check the big important boxes and don't deviate. I know, sometimes that's easier said than done, but I believe in you. Now, the last news bit to talk about today is the fact that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac will now approve bigger mortgages in 2026. What this means is the baseline conforming loan limit is jumping from $806,500 to $832,750. That's a $26,250 increase. And in high cost areas, well, your ceiling is now at $1,249,125. Now, why does this matter? Well, a conforming loan is one that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac will buy from lenders. And here's the thing. Conforming loans almost always come with better interest rates and terms than jumbo loans, which are loans above the conforming limit. So when the conforming loan limit goes up, more buyers can access those better rates. Now here's the math behind it. By law, the FHFA has to adjust these limits every year based on how much home prices increase. Between Q3 2024 and Q3 2025, home prices went up 3.2% nationally. So the loan limits go up by the same percentage. So for you realtors out there, here are your key talking points. 1. Your buyers who are shopping in the $750,000 to $850,000 range just got more financing options. What was a jumbo loan this last year might be conforming in 2026, meaning better rates for those buyers. Number 2, if you're in a high cost market, that 1.25 million ceiling means you can help more buyers avoid jumbo loan territory. Number three, remember this kicks in January 1st of 2026. So if you have buyers who've been on the fence this year, there's an argument for waiting just a few more weeks if they're butting up against the current limit. Number four, most buyers don't understand that crossing from conforming to jumbo can cost them significantly more in interest. So you can be the hero and let them know that the government just increased how much they're willing to back on mortgages, which means that buyer might qualify for better loan terms on a higher priced home. Now, let's be real. In a market where affordability is squeezing a lot of buyers, an extra $26,250 in conforming loan capacity is not going to revolutionize anyone's search. But for those buyers that you might have who are right at the edge, it could be the difference between getting a conforming rate at like 6.3% versus a jumbo rate at like 6.8. So that is this week in real estate, Unpacked. Home prices are growing at their slowest pace in over a decade. Mortgage applications are up, but buyers are still hesitating. And one analyst predicts a 50% crash that isn't coming. So this week, when someone asks you what's happening in the market, you've got a real answer. Not a vague one, not a cheerleading one, a real one. And that's what we're doing here every Monday, giving you the intel you need to be the real estate economist of choice in your market. If you found this useful, hit subscribe. That way, every Monday afternoon, you'll have this week's market briefing ready to go. I'm Jennifer Templeton, fellow realtor and broker associate with the Cresthedge Group at Keller Williams Rockwell. I hope you found this helpful. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.